What is up, everyone? Mark here, and welcome to another episode of Pandemic Pantry Extra. Guys, it's the end of June, and I would be remiss if I did not do some kind of recipe to help celebrate LGBTQ Pride Month here in Rhode Island. Now, depending on where you live in the world, Pride celebrations are held all throughout the year. Here in North America, here in the United States, we generally celebrate during the North American summer months, June, July, and August. But again, it can be any time of year. So end of June and before the month is out, I did want to get this recipe in, and I know it's last minute, but delicious nonetheless. So the recipe that I'm going to be doing today is for Italian rainbow cookies. Number of reasons there, right? So the stripes, red, white, and green, evocative of a rainbow, perfect for Pride. I've always thought they were delicious. I grew up with them. They're also a celebration of my partner Joe's Italian heritage, right? And in a way, they're also a celebration of my Jewish heritage. As you know, it was a European recipe brought over to the United States in the early 20th century in New York. The melting pot that it was had a high Jewish population, so it became a very popular item in Jewish bakeries and Jewish delis. So I certainly remember growing up with them in the local Jewish delis and Jewish bakeries around where I live. And I think once you try them, you will love them too. Before we get started, I do want to thank you all again for continuing to watch the videos and continuing to support the channel and everything that I'm doing here. Please, if you haven't already, subscribe. If you're watching this video on Facebook right now, then just go over to youtube.com. If you're already watching on YouTube, just click the red button down below to subscribe, and make sure you click the bell icon so you'll get a notification every time I have a new video out. Don't forget to also follow me on social media. You can find me at MarkBurm on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. All right, let's get started. Okay, so we've got all of our ingredients here. To start off, we're going to need 1 cup of white sugar. We're going to need 1 package, about 8 ounces of almond paste. We're going to need 3 sticks of butter, softened, and I have these cut up into about 1 tablespoon chunks just to make it easier to add in. We're going to need 1/4 cup of milk. We're going to need a couple of teaspoons of almond extract. We're going to need 2 cups of all-purpose flour, some red and green food coloring. Again, depending on the colors that you choose to use, you can make whatever colors you want, but we're going to go with the traditional Italian colors. And we're going to need 4 eggs separated. So we're going to use the yolks first, and then we're going to whip up the whites and add that into the batter second. Once we've got our cakes baked, we are going to need about 1 cup of chocolate chips, which we're going to melt. That'll go on the top. And we're going to need a couple of different jams. I'm going to be using seedless raspberry and apricot for the layers to glue things together. And we're going to be baking this divided out into 3 9x13 baking sheets. They're very thin cakes. You can use quarter sheet pans. You can use any 9x13 baking pan that you have. You just need to be careful with it. We've greased the pans already and lined them with parchment paper. I've shown you guys how to do that 100 times, so I'm not going to waste your time with doing that again here. Okay, so we're going to get things started by adding the sugar, the almond paste, and about 1/3 of the butter. And we're going to get this going on low speed. Now, one of the hard parts here is getting the almond paste to break up. It's a little thick, so I want to make sure that that's all broken up, and once we've got a relatively smooth consistency here, we're going to add the rest of the butter and continue to mix. Looks like this is fairly well combined to start. So we're going to add the rest of the butter. And continue to mix. And we do want to occasionally scrape down the bowl just to make sure everything is getting properly mixed. Okay, now on a lower speed, we're going to add our milk slowly. And we're going to drop in one yolk at a time until they're combined. And we're going to do 2 teaspoons of almond extract. Now turn up the speed a little bit and just keep beating this until it's creamy, and stopping every so often just to scrape down the bowl and make sure everything is well combined. Okay, now we're going to slowly add our flour and continue to mix on low speed. Slowly, because if we mix it in too fast, we're going to have flour all over the kitchen. And the last of the flour. I'm going to scrape this down one last time and give it a final mix. Okay, now we're going to transfer this to another bowl and set it aside. Okay, so we have changed out the attachment on the mixer to the whisk, and we're adding our 4 egg whites to the work bowl. And we're going to whip these up until stiff peaks. And that is going to take a few minutes. Now you may have noticed there is no chemical leavening, no yeast, nothing like that in this recipe. So all of the rise that we're going to get out of this is going to be from these egg whites. So we're going to take about 1/3 of our egg whites and add them to the batter. And I'm going to go ahead and mix this through pretty aggressively. The point here is to use the light egg whites to kind of loosen up this batter, and then we'll more carefully fold in the next 2/3. In goes the rest of the eggs. Okay, so weighing out my batter, I'm going to need about 420, 422 grams of batter for each of my 3 bowls. So I'm gonna just measure out 420 about grams of batter into 2 separate bowls. One of them isn't going to get colored, so that will stay in here. Okay, so 1 bowl will get a few drops of red. And gel food coloring really works best here. It gives you most vibrant colors, but you can use what you have. You know, standard vegetable food coloring in the little squeeze bottles is just fine. I like to add a few drops first, mix it together, see what I got, and then go from there. Okay, now we're going to carefully transfer each of the 3 batters into each of our prepared 3 9x13 baking sheets and get it spread as thin as we possibly can. Okay, now these are going to go into a 325-degree oven for about 10 to 12 minutes, just long enough to bake through and set. Remember, they're incredibly thin, so they're not going to take long at all. I can only fit 2 on one shelf and 1 on another, so I'm going to rotate these about halfway through just to make sure that they're all baked evenly. Okay, now our cakes just need to cool completely before we move on to the next step. So we'll check back with you in a little while. Okay, so we have unmolded all 3 of our cakes, which are now fully cooled, and we are going to start to build our layers. Now you can do this really in any order you like. Generally speaking, you want to keep the uncolored layer in between to have some separation between the colored layers. Again, we're doing the traditional Italian flag colors, red, white, and green, but you can use whatever colors you want for your cookies. Now, first layer that's going to go down will be the red layer, and we're just going to very carefully flip that. Oop. Now, if this happens, don't worry, because this is all going to get pressed together. Okay, so we're going to spread our apricot jam first. And just to make this a little bit easier, I'm just going to use one of these little pan scrapers. Just to bring that jam all the way out to the edge. This is a very thin layer, we don't want to overdo it. And don't worry if you make a little bit of a mess with the sides, with stuff dribbling down. We're going to trim this before we cut the final pieces. Of course, you don't have to trim it. I mean, we're just going to do that for neatness, but one of the side benefits of trimming it is that the cook gets to eat the trimmings. Okay, and next comes our white layer. So close. And like I said, this is all going to get glued together and pressed and chilled before we cut the final cookies, so don't worry about it if the pieces crack or start to come apart. It's all going to taste the same in the end. Okay, next up we have our seedless raspberry jam. And you do want to use seedless with this. Not that raspberry seeds aren't edible, but they're not pleasant to get stuck in your teeth, and we definitely want a nice, smooth cookie. Okay, and now our last layer, and of course this is where it gets a little more precarious. And again, don't worry too much about a little bit of shifting or cracking. Okay, now we're going to cover this with plastic wrap. And if you like, you can leave the last layer of parchment on there before you cover this up, but you don't have to. And we're going to take one of our pans and center that on here. And we're going to weigh this down with some heavy cans or jars. In this case, we're going to use our good old Manischewitz pre-made matzo ball soup. Now, this is going to go into the refrigerator to set up for about 4 hours before we come back and do our final step, which will be to spread the melted chocolate over the top. And once that sets up, we'll finally be able to cut these and eat them. Okay, as you can see, we've taken our cake layers out of the refrigerator, unwrapped the plastic, taken the pan off the top, and I've got my melted chocolate here ready to go. No double boiler, nothing crazy, just microwaved my chocolate chips. I used mini chocolate chips because I happen to have those left over from another recipe. Mint chocolate chip ice cream, which I think you're going to see next week. But for now, I just melted these in the microwave about 45 seconds, checked it, stirred it a little bit, 45 seconds more, stirred it again, and that's what we've got here. So again, about a cup of chocolate chips, and we're just going to dump this out onto the top of our cake layers and spread it evenly across the top. Okay, that's pretty thin, and I think that's about even. Now, you can leave the topping just like this. I like to drag a fork through it just to leave some lines, create a little bit of a pattern. You can omit this step if you like, totally up to you. If you do this, just be careful that you don't dig down too far, because you'll start scratching and scraping the cake and digging up crumbs, and you do not want that. And again, I'm not too worried about the edges here because we're going to be trimming this, so our final product cookies will still look very nice. All right, so this is going to go back into the refrigerator to cool just long enough for the chocolate to solidify, so we'll give it maybe an hour or so. We'll take it out, trim it up, cut them up, and then we will be tasting. Okay, we are ready to trim and cut and taste. So I've already measured and marked. So the recipe has us cut these into 1.5 inch squares. So let's get this trimmed and get started. Just like I remember. So it took a while. We finally got a finished product. Look at those little gems. Beautiful. All right, well, I've got some cookies to eat. Happy Pride. I hope you liked the recipe. If you did, give the video a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.